And I'll never forget this. And I still talk about it to this day, but I'll never forget in the history of doing all of these late night shows, Kilborn, Carson, all of these shows, the only person that ever yelled at me for an audience being bad was Craig Ferguson. He literally pulled me down from the bleachers when I was doing warm up after the first act, pulled me around the corner and was berating me about how bad the audience was. And of course, has nothing to do with the monologue being shitty, has nothing to do with the guests being awful. Of course, it's the audience, right? Of course. Even at other shows, there's going to be days where the audience isn't great. They just don't, it's same with comedy. They just don't come together as a group collectively. But I will never forget when he did that. I to this day have just bad feelings about him.
This is Coop's Comedy Corner. Buckle up because it's funny as Coop's Comedy Corner.
Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. I'm your host, Steve Cooper. And welcome back. I got to tell you, people, don't forget the website, coopscomedycorner.com. It's for all things Steve Cooper merchandise. We got t-shirts for this show. We got t-shirts for my business podcast, The Coop Tank. And, of course, t-shirts for Cooper Talk. Plus, we got mugs. We got doggy sweaters. We got a whole bunch of great stuff. So go to coopscomedycorner.com. And, I mentioned my show, Cooper Talk, and it was 12 years ago in February that my guest did my show, Cooper Talk. And I think I worked with him at a club, which I have a very funny story to tell him about that. But he met my now wife, and he was so kind that he was doing warm-up for the show called Sullivan Son, which was a really good show. And he got us to go see it. He gave me a t-shirt. He gave my now wife a script. And he's just a good guy that, we all like to bust his chops. And it's Gary Cannon. How you doing, Gary?
Hi, how are you? Good to see you.
Good. I was thinking about that. I still have that Sullivan Son shirt. I have it in my closet, and it's 12 years old because it was a very good quality shirt. But you were doing that was one of your first warm-up gigs, right?
No, that was my very first sitcom that I did warm up on. I had done a bunch of other shows, talk shows, game shows, variety shows, that kind of thing. But Sullivan Son was my very first sitcom to do warm up on. And the truth is, when you're a warm-up person in LA, the sitcoms are hard to get because there's only 4 or 5 people that do those shows. They're very select on who they use because sitcoms are a lot different than, say, a talk show or something else. A sitcom could take 5-6 hours to film. So they're very intricate in a sense of you having to kill a lot of time while they're redoing a scene, while they're rewriting the show. So you're in and out all the time, rather than when I would work on Conan, that was 15 minutes at the top of the show would start, you'd be done. So there's just different ways that shows work. A sitcom is probably one of the hardest shows to do warm-up on. Now, the money's probably the best, but the only reason I got that gig on Sullivan & Son, my friend Steve Byrne was starring and executive producing it, and he said, I want Gary to do the warm-up for it. Or else trying to get a warm-up gig on a sitcom would be very difficult without experience. So if Steve hadn't recommended me, I don't know if I would have gotten hired for it.
Well, I remember you had told me also, I still remember from our first interview, you really went out of your way to do stuff like you bought gift cards. You really made it like your domain. I mean, what made you be so creative in that way? Because a lot of guys would just showed up and bullshitted their ways through.
It's interesting that you remember that, Steve, because I knew that was going to be a long tape day. I knew that the show, being new, didn't have a lot of money, if any, for swag. And I knew we were also going to have a paid audience. And for people watching and listening who don't know what that is, so many shows back in the day filmed here in LA. And it's different now. Things are slowly going away with the state of Los Angeles. But, back years ago, there used to be a ton of stuff taping in LA. Sitcoms, game shows, talk shows, late night shows. It was an incredible time. But the problem is with a new show like Sullivan & Son or any type of new talk show where the audiences don't know what that show is, they have to bring in paid audience members. So they're bringing in church groups, baseball teams from a local college. They're bringing in whoever they can to fill those seats for the 6 hours you're going to be there. So I knew in order for that audience to be better, right? Those groups are paid to be there, obviously, but they're raising money for their church or for their school. So the individual people aren't seeing the reflection of it at all. But I knew that I needed to go out and buy stuff to goose the audience, whether it was Starbucks gift cards, whether it was having one big prize at the end of the show for my best audience member. Maybe that was a $100 gift card at Target, whatever that was. I just knew it was an investment, because if you wave that around at the beginning of the show saying, my favorite, loudest, most enthusiastic audience member will walk away with this, it really adds value to where their energy level is. And it worked. And as the show went on, we did end up getting a budget for gifts. But in the beginning, a lot of those shows, they just don't have it. So not that some warm-up guys wouldn't use it and just say, hey, I'm just going to entertain them on my own. No gifts. I just knew we needed that. I knew Steve hired me. It was a reflection on Steve if the audience wasn't good or I wasn't good. So I just knew what I had to do to make sure that audience was good. And Steve, here's the other problem. With a sitcom, you tape one show a week, right? Sullivan Son only did 10 episodes a season. So it's not like Conan or a daytime show where if the audience isn't great, you're back tomorrow, right? They'll forget about the show the previous day. With a sitcom, if you're doing 10 episodes, you have all week to stew about how bad that audience was the night before, all week. So now they have all week to think about, hey, was the warm-up guy bad? Was the crowd bad? Like, it's never the script that's bad. It's never the acting that's bad. It's never the producing that's bad. It's the audience. All these shows think they have the $1 million script. It's the funniest thing ever. You and I both know that's not true. So it's easy for them to shift focus and be like, hey, it's on you. That's why, like, comics who I know that work on cruise ships, they're the most expendable people on that ship, right? If people complain, it's easy to get rid of a comic. People can complain about the food, the Broadway show, the cabins. There's nothing they're going to do about that. The comic is the most expendable person of a production. Who cares? Get rid of them. Well, let's try somebody else. Let's see if they can throw some fuel onto this fire, even though they may get the same results. But I just knew, especially with Steve hiring me, I knew it had to go well. Same with Ken Jeong. Ken Jeong has brought me onto many shows. And I knew going in, there's no way that I can let Ken down. He brought me in for Masked Singer. And that's a long tape day, 5-6 hours as they're repositioning, resetting, rehearsals, all this stuff. So I knew with Ken that I had to go in and just kick ass and make Ken proud. So the producers aren't looking at him like, who is this clown that you brought in? I mean, you just, and Steve, for the record, don't get me wrong. Sometimes these gift cards do nothing, absolutely nothing. You could be waving them around. These people could care less. I mean, they just don't, they're looking to get out of there as quickly as possible because they want to go light up their users. You get so many different people. I remember interviewing somebody at Sullivan Son, and I said, what do you do for a living? And the guy said he just got out of prison. And I believed him. I mean, you could tell that you're not getting these audiences at these new shows dressed up in suits and excited. Like, they're there for 5 hours because their church group is forcing them to be there. Their baseball team is forcing them to be there. They need new uniforms. They need new this. They need new that. They don't care. I remember one show, Steve, never forget this. It was the reboot of Mad About You. Okay. They were bringing that back for 10 episodes. Paul Reiser, Helen Hunt. I did the very first episode, and the producers told me it's going to be rabid fans from the original. I was like, great. Steve, the audience is loading in. It's all kids, backwards baseball hats. College kids. I was like, these people no clue what Mad About You was. I said, are you guys here for Mad About You? They're like, we have no idea what you're talking about. None. They just didn't know. So I think these shows want to give the idea that there's so many rabid fans waiting outside, and they're not. They just weren't there for the show.
Now you've been doing warm up for a while. You got your start in stand up. Now
Yeah.
when did you get into stand up? I know you and Maison are good friends. Maison was on it
Yes.
for HBO.
Yes.
And now are you from Detroit originally?
From Detroit, but started stand up in San Francisco. That was when I started back in when did I start? 1998. So started stand up in San Francisco. There were two big clubs in San Francisco, the Punchline and Cobb's. They're now one. They now are under the same umbrella of Live Nation. But it was weird when you started in San Francisco, you either got love at the Punchline or Cobb's, the one or the other. There was two different managers, two different owners. I managed to get love at the Punchline. They worked me a ton. No love at Cobb's, nothing. So I would host there all the time. My very first paid week at the Punchline, I will never forget this, co-headlined Tom Rhodes and Mitch Hedberg. I mean, it was absolutely unbelievable to look back, and that was my first paid week. The crazy thing was they were flip-flopping who would go first, right? So one night, Tom would go first, followed by Mitch. Next night, Mitch, followed by Tom. I'll never forget this, Steve. The Friday night, first show, all of the people from the Punchline booking office were in the audience to see this show because they wanted to see Tom and Mitch. And I remember we were about to start, and they said, neither of the guys are here. Keep going until we light you. Well, I didn't have any more than 15 minutes. So I knew at 15 minutes, if they weren't there, I was going to be doing a dance contest, where the birthdays, shout out to the troops. I knew I just didn't have it. And so now the pressure's on even more because all of these people who booked me from the Punchline were there in the audience. I'm doing my thing. I'm at the end, Steve. I'm like, this is over. And as fate would have it, I look up, the red light pops on. I see Tom in the back through the curtain, and he was there. And it just was very magical how it ended. He showed up, and it turned out to be a good night. But it could have been, listen, you see this doing warm up. You see it, hey, keep going, stretch. The host isn't ready. A guest won't come out. One of the guests is late. You see it all the time. I see it right now. It's a difficult chore because as a comic, you know that you can front load your set. If I know I'm going to do 30 minutes, I can front load it 30 minutes. But if I do all my good stuff and then now they're telling me to stretch it out, well, we're all in danger. Now it's just bad. So I met you at Sullivan Son? Is that where it was?
No, I met you. You did Cooper Talk because I think I may have met you at Flappers. I don't know why. I know you from Facebook, and Scalaro and Roy Wood had done Cooper Talk with Sullivan Son because they were both on it. And somehow your name came up, and you came into Burbank to the studio, and my wife Joanne, the one married now, was visiting from New Jersey. She was there, and then when she came out next time, I talked to you because she wanted to see a show. And I know Jimmy Pardo had gotten us to see, who you took over later for Conan, had gotten us to go see Conan. And so you invited us to the show, and we went, and which I really liked that show. It was a really good show. And I ended up interviewing Dan Lauria, who was a great guy. And but yeah, you invited us, and Joanne got the script because you wanted to give her a t-shirt, but they only had larges. So I got the t-shirt. And
what was the script, by the way?
And
do you remember what episode it was?
I do not remember. What episode it was, but it was I don't know because I watch the show all the time. That's the thing. But if you watch it, it all runs together. But it was Joanne's first time at a taping, and I living in LA. If you're in the industry, you don't go to tapings.
Never.
When someone visits, you'll say a taping. But that's the thing. So let me get back to you. You're in San Fran now. What makes you go to LA? Because was your goal just to be a stand-up? Did you want to act? Did you want to write? What did you want to do?
By the way, I just want to rewind for 2 seconds. I remember when I first started Sullivan Son, I was such a huge, huge Wonder Years fan. Maybe one of my top 3 favorite shows of all time. I loved it. So then I get to work. Dan Lauria is the dad. And I'll never forget, Stephen, when we filmed the show, every summer, Dan would have a little party and a barbecue at his house. And I remember going there. It was all the cast. It was Dan. I remember swimming in his pool. And I remember Dan saying something like there were a lot of episodes of the Wonder Years that he wasn't even on, or he had one line. And I said, what was the line that you had in the shows that you did? And the line was, like he just made that grunt from whatever the scene was. And I'll never forget. It was like that little moment of like, oh my gosh, this is insane. This is my very cool Hollywood moment, being at his house, swimming in his pool, because I was such a fan, right? So, but getting back to stand up, yeah, no, I don't know what the thought was when I first started. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I loved performing. I knew that after a few years in San Francisco, I'd kind of done what I wanted to do and was a little bit bored. And I knew that if I was going to make a move, let's do it. So I ended up, I think I was doing stand up for about 4 years. And there were so many comics in San Francisco who said, do not move to LA unless you're featuring at the clubs up here, Punchline Cobb's. And I was like, well, who's making that rule? I was like, that doesn't, I mean, because I quickly found out when you move to LA, the Punchline and Cobb's are so indifferent and nobody cares about them. They just care about what you're doing. So it was just, the truth was, it was a silly thing. I think a lot of those guys who were saying that were just afraid to move, truthfully, because they didn't want to move. So I remember moving, and I got very fortunate with a series of events that happened. When I was living in San Francisco, I worked with Brett Butler a lot. Remember her, Grace Under Fire? Worked with her quite a bit. Yeah. When I moved to LA, she was going to be at the Ontario Improv, which is east of LA. It's 60 minutes east. I get a call from Matt Coman, who was booking the improvs at the time. He says, hey, this is Matt Coman. I work for the Improv. Brett Butler's manager reached out to me, said that she wants you to open for her in Ontario. So I'm calling to set this up. Great. Went out there, did the show. Boom. A couple of weeks later, I reach out to Matt. I would love to showcase for you at the Hollywood Improv, to become a regular at the Hollywood Improv. So he sets me up. It's a daytime showcase, main room, all comics in the room. I'm sure you know what that's like. It was brutal. I mean, you're just playing to the other comics. I remember saying during the performance of like 3 minutes, I said, hey, Matt, you could tell me right now that I'm a paid regular here. This is obvious that I'm crushing this. Sorry, you guys. I'm the only one that's going to be. I literally was calling out how pathetic this was. And I remember at the end of the show, I was in the dining room and he came over and he said, hey, I'm going to start working you. And I remember like 3 days from that date, he calls me and he says, hey, we're going to put you on. You're going to host Thursdays, which is Drew Carey and Friends. Do you remember those shows?
Yeah, yeah.
Drew Carey and Friends was the biggest night of the week at the Hollywood Improv. Always sold out. It was Drew Carey doing improv with Ryan Stiles and Jonathan Mangum and all of these other people. Wayne Brady would show up. It was sold out every single Thursday night. And I remember he started working me on those Thursdays, and it was terrifying. It was exciting. It was all that stuff, but it was a way for me to get into the rotation, keep getting better. And it's so funny. Years later, Matt now owns the Tempe Improv. He owns Stand Up Live in Phoenix. I literally 2 months ago, he flew me down to Phoenix to do the auction and comedy for his kids' elementary school. So here it is, like years later, I still owe him a ton of gratitude. And he had me come out and do this benefit auctioneering role. And he said, we need somebody who can make fun of us and who can be high energy. And I went in there just dumping on them, dumping on Matt. And it really was a lot of fun, kind of coming full circle and how much he's done for me.
Well, that's, your act. I mean, when I work with you, this is a story I'm going to tell you about flappers, which cracks me up. But your act, you make fun of the other acts, and you make fun of the crowd, and you make fun of the club, and you make fun of yourself. And we were doing Flappers, the Yoo-Hoo Room, which Flappers is a club in Burbank. And we were on the show, and you were closing. And it was a Yoo-Hoo show. It was like 7 people. And I remember, I think you said, oh, look at Cooper. He looks like a pedophile. Or whatever. You just give me shit. And I thought it was funny. But I forget who the act was, though. But you busted this one act's balls. And I can't remember his name. But that night on Facebook, he posted he was all pissed off. He's like, I can't believe the headliner was making fun of me. What kind of act is that? And I'm like, dude, I wanted to say that is his act. Because that's how you coined that act. So where did that come from? Because, it takes a lot of balls. Because if you go up on stage and, you start fucking with everybody and you're making fun of the other acts and you're making fun of the crowd and you're making fun of the owners, in the crowd, some people get nervous about that. So did you always do your act
No,
like that, or when did that happen?
no, I don't think so. I think, well, it's funny. So I do Comedy and Magic Club a lot, and Comedy and Magic on the weekends, they'll do 10 comics. They'll do a 10 comic show. So it's just a potpourri of people. So I will always, because it's a magic club too. So they'll bring on like a Ron Pearson, who's a juggler. I'll always say, if you guys don't start laughing, I'm going to bring the juggler back out here again, depending on who I follow. The audience immediately loves it. There's a comic, I'm sure you know him, Bruce Fine. Do you know who Bruce is? Bruce is a comic.
Bruce.
He's probably 4'10". And I'll always say, if I follow him, if you don't start laughing, I'm going to bring the little guy back out here again. They immediately know who it is. I think what happens is, if I am on a show, right, at the Improv, they'll always have what's called a cold open. So before I go on and start hosting it, it's always a newer comic that is relatively new to performing or new to the Improv. They'll go up, do 5 minutes, bring me on, the show starts. If I don't know that person, Steve, I will not make fun of them. If I don't know them, I will. But if I do know them, I'll always go up and say, how about a hand for Richard? A lot of people don't know this was his very first time performing here. We all saw that set. It'll be his last. And it gets a big, but I have to know that person. So when I do it, I always at least now make it a point to know that person. Now, the person that you're mentioning, I don't remember who that was, but I also think somebody who doesn't have thick skin can't take it. And I think it's clearly a joke. It's clearly a goof, right? I'm making fun of myself if you kind of extract the act and see what it is. It's clearly all about me dumping on myself. It's never about that person. But I remember there was a time I was working in, I think, Milwaukee, and I said to the guy, I said, if you guys don't start laughing, I'm going to bring the host back up here again. And it gets a big laugh. And I remember at the end of the show, he's like, what are you doing, dude? And I then realized I have to be more cognizant of who I'm doing it to, because they don't know me. It's almost like when I dump on people online, whether it's a Gene Pump or these other guys, I know them. So if I dump on somebody that I don't know, I remember there's a club in Arizona called Stir Crazy, and I was making fun of the club, right? And the owner's wife ran the social media team. She's like, what's up with this guy? He's being obnoxious. And I then realized, like, she's not in on it. So she doesn't. So you got to kind of scale it back a little bit, which I now try to do. You can make fun of people as long as you know them and they're in on it, right? But I couldn't do it unless, at least that's my philosophy now, is to just kind of play nice.
Yeah, because it's always you and Brian McDaniel and Pompa and
always.
sometimes I think Marshall. Okay, is it Marshall Epstein? Wait,
yeah.
What does he do? Like, is he a comic? I have no idea. Like, he knows all these people.
The truth is, I don't know what he does. I'm not sure. I'm confused. Listen, I like it when it's like guys like Gene. I love making fun of people when it's guys like Gene, because they can go toe to toe. They're really funny. But I don't know what some of these guys post. But one for you, which is crazy. I remember back in the day going back and forth with Josh Nasser, another comic. We always made fun of each other. My mom literally reached out to me and she said, I got to be honest with you, Josh, this guy on Facebook's making fun of you. It's bothering me. I'm going to reach out to him on Facebook. I said, Mom, are you seeing what I'm writing to him? It was just, and I remember even with the Sullivan Son guys, we went out, we were on the road together, and Steve Byrne was making fun of me at lunch. And my mom pulled me aside and she said, I'm going to have to talk to Steve. I think it's just rude what he's doing. My mom never saw at the Sullivan Son tapings how I would make fun of Steve's acting. I would make fun of the show. I would make fun of the entire situation. I would say Steve is just a dramatic actor. This is a soap opera being filmed. It's not a comedy. Who knows when this is going to air? Like, nobody saw that. My mom never saw that part, but she saw Steve poking fun at me and thought, as a mom, I'm going to step in.
Now, you host a lot, but it's funny. And once again, a weird memory I have two things I remember from the first time you were on my show. One, you told me a story about how you sold copiers, but you never went to work and you just collected the money.
Yep.
I have that. And I think when you did my show, you were a little bit nervous because you were going back to headline. Was it Mark Ridley's Comedy Council?
Great memory. Yeah.
Something that because you weren't really, you were working, but you weren't really, you were a little nervous because you're going back to your hometown and your
headline.
Now,
yes.
Yeah. Now, I mean, for you, because you go on the road with a lot of people, you host because you do a great job hosting. Do you get headlining gigs, or do you sit there and do you like doing the hosting gig? Because you always work, so it's like, why are you going to burn yourself out? Like when you go to Phoenix or you go to those clubs, do you go in as a headliner, or do you go in with like a friend of yours
So
and you
it
do a
depends. It's
show,
funny
or
you
you
say
go?
that. It's funny you say that because the club in Phoenix that I just headlined, the guy knows that I don't love headlining, but will do it. And I love stretching that muscle. He will also accommodate me and ask me how much time do I want to do. So instead of a headliner doing an hour, 50 minutes, I'll say, can I do like 30, right? And then you build the show around that. Maybe a couple of guest sets, the feature does longer because I could do it. Hosting is my wheelhouse. It's what I'm good at. I know what I'm good at. And to me, I work a lot because I'm a good host, right? When I did Ridley's, this is a funny story. I grew up in Michigan, but I never did comedy there. I started in San Francisco and I lived there for a little bit. But Mark Ridley has this great club. And the interesting thing about Mark Ridley's, it works a variety of people. Like he'll headline me, right? And then the next weekend he'll have like Kathleen Madigan or an A-lister or somebody, right? So he levels it out. So he probably pays them a lot of money and then doesn't have to pay me a lot of money. It's the shift, right? So I was going to be back home for Christmas. This was years ago. He gave me a headlining date, December 26th, 27th, and 28th, 5 shows. And I remember, Steve, I went out of my way to do media, radio, TV, just to get the numbers up. I obviously had a lot of friends out there, but I really wanted, even though I had a flat rate, I wasn't making any extra. I worked my butt off to bring people into that club. When I did the one in Phoenix, you didn't have to do anything. Here's the check. We don't care. We'll promote it ourselves. But I really wanted it to be busy. So I remember going up there, having fun. I remember, I'll never forget, this was right after Christmas. So there were these Christmas trees on stage, and I would dump on the trees. I would make fun of the trees. They were from Home Depot. Nothing says happy holidays than these dead trees from Home Depot, like really making fun of them. The next day I got there, the trees were gone. And I had heard from the manager that she was pissed that I was dumping on the trees. Well, the trees being gone means I don't have an extra 3 minutes of material. I'm not joking. This is a true story. I see the trees gone. I'm thinking I got to kill 3 more minutes because that's how I was killing 3 minutes. I literally had one of the door guys go out there, pull the trees from the garbage or wherever they were and put them back on stage. Okay. So this manager wasn't thrilled with me. The shows went great. I thought everything was fun. I'll never forget to this day. I go to collect my check at the end of the week and I say to the woman, hey, great week. And she said, no, not really. And I said, wait, what? Excuse me? She said, we got a lot of complaints. I was like, okay, which was odd, Steve, because I was out there every night at the end of the show saying goodbye. And I said, well, it's a comedy club. I assume that you would get complaints all the time, right? And she said, not here, we don't. And it was a complete FU to me at the end of a week that I worked hard for. And she didn't want to give me the satisfaction of leaving in a good space. And, we both know this. How many comics go out on the road? They leave Sunday night. Hey, numbers were great. Happy to have you. Can't wait to have you again. Then on Monday, that comedy club owner will call your agent or manager and say, it was difficult. Numbers were down. He was a pain in the ass. We had a lot of check walk out. So I think this woman really just wanted to stick it to me and let her know that she was in charge. I mean, and as is typical, we both know this, she's no longer there. She's been gone forever. She's probably running a Trader Joe's. I mean, it's so like you're shocked that these people, I meet people all the time that run these companies, these clubs, and I'll say, where'd you come from? What's your background? I was an assistant manager at a T-Mobile store. You're like, well, you're a perfect fit for running this comedy club. You yeah. The first time I worked at the San Jose Improv, not Louis C.K. It was Louis Black was headlining, and I remember calling the manager, or whoever it was. I said, "Hey, Louis Black is coming this weekend," and they're like, "Louis Black, is he a host or featuring?" Like it was just they were so out of touch, they just didn't know. So I just think to that point, like if I am headlining, I'll kind of divert, which is so crazy to look back when I headlined 15 years ago and I probably just didn't have the time to do it, right? And I remember calling Mark Ridley before I got there and I said, hey, as a comic, I love to have guest sets on the show, which was a way of saying, hey, fill the time with other morons, right? And Mark said, we don't do guest sets. I was like, ah, shit. Now I got to cover the other 6 minutes. Because, Steve, there were some comics that would do exactly 45 minutes and walk off stage. You know what I mean? Like, that's all they would do. Not a minute more, not a minute less. But I just, when there's a little flexibility in there, it's always great. You can kind of play around with it.
So, okay. So you're in LA. I want to go back when you're in LA. You have this great night at the Improv, and you're doing the Drew Carey night. So now, at what point do you start getting into warm up? Because the people I know who do warm up, like Joey Cola was on a few weeks ago. Joey does a lot of stuff. He does Rachel Ray show. You guys know each
Drew
other.
Barrymore. I'm
Frank
close with Jerry.
Nicotero.
I just saw him.
Yeah,
He's
so you guys, but Joey's been doing it for a long time. So since I've known you, you've been doing warm up. But when I met you, that was your first sitcom. How did you get into the warm up gig? Because, like you said, it's not like anyone can do it, and it's got to be. How did you break into it? Because you've been doing it forever.
Well, it's really crazy because I moved down to LA in 2002. Okay, so at the end of 2003, I was working as a paid regular at the Improv, and I was doing warm up for the Late Late Show with Craig Kilborn. So within a year, I had this amazing.
How did you get that job? Wait, Gary, how did you get that job with Greg Kilborn?
Okay, so when I first moved to LA, I had a day job where it was me and my boss working in a small office. We were salespeople. He was out of the office all day, every day. It's so funny thinking about it because his name is TJ. I'm still close with TJ. He actually came to one of my shows over the weekend. We're still close. He's still an amazing person. We work for a company. He was my boss. I was his sales rep underneath him. So because he was gone all the time out of the office and it was just a 2-man show, I could leave the office too and nobody would know. Nobody would have any clue that I was gone. I mean, it was very rare, right? So I would start attending TV tapings. I just wanted to kind of see what the lay of the land was. So I'd go to Craig Kilborn. I would go to other shows just to kind of see what they were doing. I saw that there was this warm-up position, and I befriended the guy that was doing Craig Kilborn. He was a guy named Roger Lundblade, who, to this very day, one of my closest friends. He was doing Craig Kilborn, but because Roger also did sitcoms during the week, he would leave and book out 2 or 3 days a week to go do sitcoms. They were way more money, right? Let's say a late night show pays $500 a show. He was probably making $5,000 doing a sitcom. Okay. So of course he's going to leave. So they had a backup guy to Roger. And when I started coming to hang out, they were no longer happy with the backup guy. The way that the wheel rolled, it was just pure luck that I started hanging out. Right. So I kind of got a sense of that. Roger and I became close over a couple of months. He said, hey, they're looking for a backup to me to fill in on days that I can't be here. I was like, okay, great. I auditioned during a real show, me and I think one other guy or 2 other guys. That was it. It was 3 of us total. We do a real show. Roger was one of the decision makers who said, I think this person would be a good fit to back me up. Roger and one of the producers. I get the gig and it's immediately my gig within 2 months of hanging out there. It was, and to have a show like that in town, it was also interesting too, Steve, because I remember at the time, Roger might have been getting like 700 or 800 a show for that show. And they were paying me scale, like 300 or whatever it was, because they knew that they could. I wanted the gig, all that other stuff. So I did that, ended up filling in for him anytime, which was usually 2-3 days a week, right? It was great. Then he would do the sitcoms. I would come in. Then Ferguson takes over. I do it for Ferguson. Then Carson Daly brings his show from New York to LA. I knew I was kind of done being an underling substitute for somebody, and I really wanted my own full-time gig. So I get an audition for Carson Daly, me and a couple of other people. Brody Stevens was one of the guys, and ended up booking it, which for me, it was a game changer because I was no longer somebody else's shadow. I mean, the truth was Craig Kilborn, Craig Ferguson, those guys didn't respect me all that much because they loved Roger. And if Roger couldn't be there, they felt like, oh, we have the babysitter in tonight. And they didn't enjoy it. So when I got my own gig, it was great.
Now, what is when you say you audition, what is the audition like for a warm-up guy? Because you're sitting there. It's not like when you're doing stand-up and you're doing your 7-minute set. What do you just, as you said, you do the show, but you watched, I mean, what was your auditions like for like Carson Daly? Was it
Yeah.
you in front of the show? Was the show already cast or I mean, what happened?
So when I did Kilborn, that was a real show, an absolute real show on a Tuesday, regular show. Carson Daly, I'm very proud of how I got that show. Carson Daly was in New York, and I remember leaving a voicemail for somebody. I didn't know who it was. I found out a name. It was Nicole Yarin, who was a producer. I said, hey, this is Gary Cannon. I work at the Late Show, which was good because I already had a job. It always looked good. I know you're bringing the show out to LA. Would love to be part of it. She calls me randomly. Hey, we're bringing the show. We're doing like 3 or 4 test shows that will never air. We want you to do warm up on one of the shows. So I go in there, I just hype them up. Maybe I brought my own gift cards to that extent, but I will never forget, Steve, this was, again, a proud moment for me. We taped at NBC in Burbank. As I was leaving, the audience that was there for the first show was hanging out and going right back in to do a second show, second test show, which now Brody was going to, I don't know if it was Brody or the other guy, the other warm-up was going to go do. So as I'm leaving, all the audience is still sitting out there on the benches. And they said, hey, man, we'll see you back inside in a few minutes. And I was like, I'm leaving. I'm just, I only did the one show. They're like, bummer, we liked you. I said, do me a favor, guys. The producers thought you guys were way too loud. Please do me a favor for the second show, just pull it back a little bit. And I don't know what happened. I just remember sabotaging Brody or the other guy that was in there. And I remember getting a call like a couple days later and said, hey, you're the guy. I was very proud of that moment that like, I just figured out an alti way of like, hey, let me. And the one thing that I loved about doing Last Call with Carson Daly is that it was my show. I never booked out. He respected me. It wasn't like I was subbing in for somebody, but it was my show. And that was a game changer for me because that show allowed me to get my own apartment. It kind of pulled me into a better direction since it was my own gig and I didn't have to wait for another warm-up to say, these are the days I can't do. So it was a game changer for me. And he was the nicest boss and it was a great group of people. They let me do stand-up on the show. I will never forget that being, and every time I still drive by NBC, which is now the iHeartRadio studios, I still think about my amazing memories of being there.
Now, then where do you go after Carson? Because Carson's show goes, how long were you with Carson the whole time?
4 years, maybe 4 or 3 years. Yeah. And then I think I started doing more like variety shows. Like I think I started doing America's Got Talent. I started doing Dancing with the Stars, like other types of shows like that. Chelsea Lately, I did a little bit of that. Before I then start kicking in and doing more sitcom stuff with Steve. And I think it was 2015 because Carson Daly, I'll never forget this, ended in 2009. And then I didn't start Conan, which was kind of my next late night gig, until 2015. So there was that period of like not doing any late night stuff, but I had done variety, all that other kind of like mishmash of other shows.
Now, Conan, Pardo helped you get that, right? Is that what happened?
Yeah, well, there's an interesting story about it. There's an interesting kind of dynamic to the story. Jimmy had called me because he had to take some time off to film something that he was doing. He was filming some on-camera stuff for a show, having nothing to do with Conan. So he said, will you come in and fill in for me for like 4 days? Well, that show, Conan had known me because I did other TBS shows under the Conan umbrella. I did the Pete Holmes show. I did Dion Cole. He had a show right there on the lot. So they knew me from that. But I'd never met Conan. So went over there, watched Jimmy. Jimmy and I, and Jimmy will tell you, we're two different styles of warm-up. Jimmy is somebody who stands on the floor, does audience work from the floor, brings out the band, the show starts. So the first day that I jumped in, I'm up in the audience. I had them give me t-shirts. They'd never done that before. They had them, but they never given them away. I'm doing a dance contest. And I guess Conan was backstage at the time saying, this is insane. What's going on out there? Like, because I guess the energy level was just different. And not to say good or bad different, but I just brought a different shift to it that hadn't been happening. You got to remember, too, this was in 2015. The show had been at TBS for a little while. It was just a different, it wasn't Conan on The Tonight Show. It was Conan now 3 or 4 years into TBS, right? So I get a call the next day from a producer, and they said, Conan and the show were really happy. I know you have 3 more days left. They said, are you available the rest of this year by any chance? So I don't understand what that means. Are you guys developing another show? And I was like, yeah, of course. So I didn't really understand what they were talking about. But then I did the show a few days later, and then they called me and offered me the job full time, which was an unbelievable gift because I'd been such a fan of him for so long. So here's the difference. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say what's funny when you did Conan was my friend Carrie Steuben was going to LA with his family, and he said, you know, do you have any suggestions? And I said, yeah, I can get you, and you got them. I think you got them on the list.
Okay.
So they went to see the show, and you didn't know it was my friend, but you brought him up on stage, and he won the dance contest and got a t-shirt.
I love it. Love it. Yes. It was just it was my, but here's what I will say, right? I got the gig. It happened the way it happened, but I will say this, and I've said this many times publicly. I don't think that Conan was a fan of my warm-up. I think Conan knew that it was a necessary evil for me to be there. And I think the reason I lasted as long as I did was because their executive producer, Jeff Ross, really knew that I was needed there. But I think Conan, I always look at it this way. The difference between Conan and, say, Jennifer Hudson, the show that I currently do. Jennifer respects what I do. Jennifer always gives me a shout out at the end of the show. I have a different relationship with Jennifer than I did with Conan. I think Conan liked the kind of puristic style that Jimmy brought to the show, right? Conan didn't want some dancing clown out there throwing out t-shirts, doing a dance contest to Baby Got Back. I believe that there were 2 different styles, but I believe in the moment it was a necessary evil for what the show needed at the time. And I just fit that mold of what they needed, which was really gung-hoing the audience and hyping them up and bringing them from 0 to 60 very quickly, right? Listen, I will say this, there's certain shows that I couldn't do right now because I'm just not the fit for. There's other shows that I'm a better fit for than it depends on what that is. So I think in the moment, I think Jimmy is what Conan wanted. And then I still don't know what would have happened if he didn't take the days. I don't know. But it is why I'm very careful, even after having done this for years, to ever take a day off. I just don't do it.
Now, what did you do during the pandemic? Because right there, it's not like you're just losing the comedy money, you're losing the crowd. I mean, so that must be was it a big shock to you? And how did you think? You were like, oh, this shit's got to end? I mean, what were you going through mentally during that time?
Well, the great thing was pandemic was 2020. Conan paid us for that entire year. We got paid. They paid out our contracts through the end of 2020. He still did the show from Largo without an audience. Things were kind of changing, but things were slow, not only slow, depressing. We started, which I was super happy with. We would do outdoor shows on the patio of the Hollywood Improv that I would produce and host. And it was just a way to get out and clear your head and just do something that felt creative. It was just horrible sitting at home. So that was a tough one. I ended up rescuing a lot of dogs during that time because I had the time. I was home. I think at one point during the pandemic, I probably had 15 dogs at my house because I loved the shit out of them and ended up getting them all adopted. But that was my thing. I was going to do something proactive. So then I think what happens is maybe the first show back out of the chute was The Masked Singer. That's probably maybe 2021, late 2021 or early 2022. So then I started to get the ball rolling with that. And then I remember getting a call 3 years ago to do Jennifer Hudson, which was a game changer. And I was shocked because I didn't think a daytime show was the fit for me because I was more late night, more comedy driven. And it's certainly a different vibe than when I do Conan because I could be a little dirty at a late night show and this, that, and the other. But I love it. And I think it's because of her. I think it's just that group of people that are so nice and so caring and so giving that it's the perfect fit. I love it.
Now, what's her crowd like? What's the daytime crowd like? As I said, even the late night show, the crowds, as you said, people will be sitting there, as you said, they pay or they just be handing out like, hey, come to see the such and such show. People, tourists walking through. So what's her crowd like? What can you expect? Is it like, you used to see the daytime shows were all housewives. That was what they did.
Yeah.
You see in the audience, it was all. So what is her crowd like? Is there kids there? Is there? What's it like?
It's older. It's definitely older. A lot of people coming from out of town, which again, I always take for granted because I'm so close to Warner Brothers where we film that if I have guests that come to the show, they will text me and they'll say, we're in line right now. And they'll say, are you here? Could you come out and say hi? And I'll be like, on the Peloton, like riding my bike before I do the show. And it's like, it's such a gift knowing people are waiting out there and I'm not even anywhere close to being there. I can literally get there 45 minutes before the show starts. It's just I just know. The difference between the two audiences is this. Conan, if that audience wasn't laughing when he came out, there was a problem, right? Jimmy, at the end of every warm-up, would have to go backstage and tell Conan if they were good or bad. So Conan knew what to expect, which to me isn't great because what if Jimmy's out there killing it? He comes backstage, tells Conan they're great. Conan isn't having a good time, right? Or the reverse, right? He goes back, Conan, they're not great. Now Conan's in his head. So the key with a late night crowd is you have to make sure they're laughing, engaged, having a good time. Daytime is all about happiness, right? It's all about feeling good. Thank you guys. This, that, and the other thing. So if she comes out and they're not laughing, well, I mean, that's not what the show is, right? That's just not. And I'll never forget this. And I still talk about it to this day, but I'll never forget in the history of doing all of these late night shows, Kilborn, Carson, all of these shows, the only person that ever yelled at me for an audience being bad was Craig Ferguson. He literally pulled me down from the bleachers when I was doing warm-up after the first act, pulled me around the corner and was berating me about how bad the audience was. And of course, has nothing to do with the monologue being shitty, has nothing to do with the guests being awful. Of course, it's the audience, right? Of course. Even at other shows, there's going to be days where the audience isn't great. They just don't, it's same with comedy. They just don't come together as a group collectively. But I will never forget when he did that. I to this day have just bad feelings about him. I'm not, Dr. Phil, another guy that I quit 2 weeks in because he was not a good person, just not. And, I was as much that actually, speaking of which, crazy to say now that I'm jogging my memory, 2020, no shows, still getting paid for Conan. I get a call to come in and do warm up for Dr. Phil in September. They're going to do it without an audience, but the audience is going to be virtual on TVs, right? So you're going to warm up TV monitors, right? It's like, okay. So Steve, I have to go on stage with a mask, right? And I'm trying to communicate and engage an audience on monitors. I'm in a mask. There's nobody around me. The whole thing's silly, right? Of course, 5 minutes later, Dr. Phil comes out, no mask. The whole thing is silly, right? So I'll never forget, I was excited because I was like, I need this gig. There's nothing else taping, right? They said, okay, the money's going to be this. It was really low. You'll do 5 minutes and you'll introduce him and then he'll come out. The show starts, you can leave, right? Film 2 shows a day. So after the first one, I'd go to the commissary, walk around the lot, come back, do the second, leave. Well, 5 minutes turned into 10 minutes, turned into 20 minutes, turned into 25 minutes of doing warm-up, right? At this low rate that they said was for 5 minutes. Here was the worst part. I was wearing an earpiece, and I would hear the director say in my ear, We need more jokes, please. More jokes. And it's always that thing to me where I always find it interesting where it's almost like a corporate gig, right? We want you to be squeaky clean. We want you to wear a suit. We want you to do this, but we're going to pay you $50. Okay. You can't have both.
Right.
You're going to pay me 1,000 and I'll be clean, or you keep the money at 50 and leave me the fuck alone. Right. That's the rule. So you can pay me a minimal amount, right? But the minute you start critiquing my act and the minute we start doing more than 5 minutes, which was agreed upon early on, all bets are off. We're done. We're done. This is ridiculous. So I remember calling the show and I just said, hey guys, this isn't what we agreed on. This is a bogus deal. What do you want to do? I said, I need more money. And Steve, this was at a time, there's no work. So it's like, you either take the money and shut up or complain about it. They ended up letting me go. We walked away. I remember I went to SAG-AFTRA and I called them and I said, this is a union show, right? And they're like, yeah. I said, they're certainly not paying me union rates. They went back. We went back and traced all my time. And the show had to cut me a check for like $4,000 after all was said and done. And I could not have been happier to stick it to them. And nobody on that show liked that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, Jennifer Hudson, she has so many great stars. Do you get starstruck at all? I mean, because, I know you're a performer and you work a lot with Ken Jeong and Craig Robinson and who are big stars. But you guys, Jennifer, because I always see them dancing. Do you get starstruck at all when you're there and you go, holy shit, there's such and such?
No, not anymore. I mean, not really, because it's been going on for so long. I'm trying to think if over the course of, listen, I mean, I remember like at Conan when like Martin Short was on or some of these other guys that I'm big fans of, like that was really cool comedy wise, but not so much now. It's very, because people ask me all the time, do you meet people? Do you get to, I do not fly with that section. I do my job. If I have guests, I'll ask if they can get a picture before or after, which is always cool. There's never any issue with it. But I don't take people backstage. I used to do that before. It always ended up biting me in the ass because guests don't know how to behave. I had a buddy of mine came to Conan. We were walking backstage. Snoop Dogg was walking from backstage to his dressing room. My buddy quickly grabbed him. Can we do a picture? Snoop says yes. I got in trouble the next day. Again, you just have to be, and I understood. I mean, he's there thinking he's in a safe space. He did the picture, but you can't do that. It's not acceptable. So I just think you have to be very cautious of what you're doing. And I come in, do the gig, get out. I just, I always would have people at Conan or some of these other shows. How can I get on the VIP list? I cut that all off because these gigs are too good. And these shows aren't here to entertain or for you to get selfies for your Instagram. It's just not. It depends who it is, but I try to be very cautious about it. A crazy story, 2 years ago, which would have marked 20 years of meeting my buddy Roger and working on Craig Kilborn, Roger and I had lunch with Craig Kilborn at the Grove in LA, which was an amazing full circle moment. Roger met his wife from that show. She was in the audience one day. I met Roger as a result of that show, one of my best friends. Craig Kilborn, my very first warm-up gig. It was, to me, pretty cool. It was a very cool moment in my warm-up, personal, professional world.
Now, will you keep doing warm-up? Is there, do you see an end to it? Or because you do stand-up, or is it just something that it's in you and you love it, and of course it pays well, so you're not going to sit there and go, I don't want to do it. But do you think there's any time where you will get tired of it or just say, I need to take a break?
No, because I do love it. And the alternative is, listen, I see my friends, warm-up is the baseline. Warm-up pays for the apartment, pays for the car, pays for all that stuff. Stand-up is great, but stand-up pays for the DirecTV bill, stand-up pay, all that other stuff. It's a great in-town gig. I live 10 minutes from Warner Brothers. I get to work at 1. I'm home by 6. We tape 2 shows a day, 3 days a week. It's unbelievable. I just see so many friends now that work on cruise ships. They're gone. As I get older, I love being home. I absolutely love it. So I have this great mix. I have this great warm-up job. I do a ton of stand-up. I can do spots anytime I'm in town. I usually get a lot of work at the Improv Laugh Factory. I can go do a corporate gig here and there. I started doing benefit auctioneering, which I love. So it really just, it's kind of a mix of everything. You always want more, of course, but I'm very happy and content with where things are. I enjoy it.
One final question. I always
here's the
ask
other
my
thing,
guests.
by the way, just FYI, when you look at LA right now, the landscape, there's not much taping in front of an audience right now. Back in the day when I started, there were 8 sitcoms filming in a week. There were 8 different talk shows filming in a week. Everything was out here. There's very few things that film in LA right now. There used to be a full audience company called Audiences Unlimited that would play sitcoms and all this stuff. All gone. It's just nothing there anymore. So the fact that I have a full-time, regular, stable gig in town, it's unbelievable. By the way, that show feeds my medical benefits, my retirement. It's unreal. And because we're heading into season 4, everybody knows their job. Everybody knows what they're doing. Everybody's got their thing going on. So there's never any issue with like, hey, the crowd's bad. They're not. It's like, it's a family. It's maybe one of the top jobs I've ever had in warm up, and it's because of her.
Okay, so final question. You hit on it a little earlier though, but looking back at your career and your life, and I know you can bring up the dogs because I know you do a lot with the dogs. What are you proud of when you look back? What are you proud of since you've like moved to LA and since you've gotten into entertainment?
A couple things. I am proud that people respect what I do, that people look at me as a good host, that people look at me as the guy they can come to for advice. Like, I'm pretty affable. Like, people at the Improv call me the mayor because I'm always sitting at the bar, making sure everybody's taken care of, who needs what can I get for people, even if that means, losing money at the end of the night because I'm buying drinks. I really want to make other people happy. That's kind of my thing. Even, looking back when it involves not the best decision for other people in my life, but that's my thing. I love making others happy. And I do really, really want to look back at the end of my life and say, I really made a difference to some degree helping dogs, because I'm going to meet a dog in a couple of days that's been at the shelter for a year and a half. Now I have no idea what I'm doing with that dog. I don't know if that dog can come back here with the dog that I have, but I just am trying to figure out why that dog has been there for a year and a half. I mean, I work with somebody at KTLA who gets dogs that have been in the shelter for a long time placed on TV. These are dogs that are close to me or that I advocate for. I have a dog right now that was in the shelter for 6 months and was close to being put down within minutes before we pulled him. Those are the things when I look at him sleeping, which he's doing right now on the bed, I am melted by, because I love looking at that saying that was kind of what I did. So there's a lot of things. I love being known as a good warm-up, a good host, but going to your point, Stephen, like, do I want a headline? Not really. I know my lane. I know that I'm a really good host that can kind of bring good energy to a show and, make friends and just be kind of that guy. Yeah, there's some people who come to me, hey, I want to do warm up. Well, okay, I'm happy to sit down with you, but they don't want to put in the work. They just don't want to do it. And this isn't a business where you submit a resume or what. It's all networking. There's probably under 10 guys that do warm up in LA. There's just not many. I'm sure you know them. Ron Pearson, Alan Murray, Roger Lundblade, Mark Sweet. There's just a handful of guys that do it. And now, because the landscape is changing, that number's even smaller. So, you just try to be a good, it sounds so cliche, but you just want to be a good person. That's all. And maybe sounds easier said than done, but I do love having that thing wrapped around me.
Well, this is awesome. I'm glad you got to do this, Gary. How can people find out where you're performing? It was GaryCannon.com.
This was long overdue, just so you know, long overdue. GaryCannon.com has all the links to socials and all that stuff. And when are you guys back in town? I know you guys have your own new life back east, but
nah, we're Our next vacation, we're going to Cleveland to check out the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Football Hall of Fame. I was in LA for a long time. I'm done with LA. I don't
I get it.
I don't, you know,
Listen,
it's like,
I get it. I get it. And, there was a moment, listen, during the pandemic in 2020, 2021, where I was going to move back to Michigan. I was going to help care for my mom who is dealing with dementia. And I was just going to call it and see what I could do from Michigan. And my buddy Roger, who's another warm-up guy, the guy that I met at Kilbourne, said, I have a little guest house downstairs below me. Come live there. I did. And it was a game changer. I literally lived with him. The rent was dirt cheap. Later that year, I got the call to do Jennifer Hudson. My life changed. My life literally changed within those few months. So I'm very grateful. And it is funny because so many people forget those who helped them. Steve Byrne was a guy, gave me my first sitcom right out of the chute. I owe that guy indefinitely. Ken Jeong always has my back. Roger took care of me when I needed it. So, there are certain people that it's easy to forget about for whatever reason because life gets in the way and all this stuff. But I just always remember those who take care of me and just try to pay it forward. It's simple. It's just a simple math.
Well, there you go. Well, people, so yeah, go check out Gary. And if you're in LA, go find him. Go see the Jennifer Hudson Show. Say, hey,
we start back in September. There
you go, people. And also go to coopscomedycorner.com and get that merchandise. Go to YouTube and find Coop's Comedy Corner. Watch past episodes. Jimmy Corhan, the producer, I want to thank him of Comedy Trainwreck. He does a great job, helps a lot of Philadelphia comics out. And he's been making these shorts. My one short got 7.5 thousand views when I was interviewing Steve Young. We did a little short. And also go to coopertalk.net. I have over 1,040 episodes. Recently interviewed Stan Lynch, the drummer from Tom Petty. And also don't forget my business show on YouTube, The Coop Tank. Every week I moderate 3 different local business people. We talk about all that good stuff. So I want to thank again Jimmy Corhan and Comedy Trainwreck, Gary Cannon. I'm Steve Cooper. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.
Coop's Comedy Corner.